first, live, local. This is Fox 12 Now.
Weatherman, we can't allow any further delay. So stop your waiting.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for another episode of the Fox 12 Weather Podcast. Today is Thursday, July 11th. I'm meteorologist Jeff Orgeron, joined by Camila Ortiz. Hey Camila.
Good morning, Jeff.
It's great to have you on the podcast. Great to have somebody on the podcast. Boy, I straight soloed that one last week.
You're flying solo. I'm sure you crushed it though. Full disclosure, I did not listen to it, but I bet
okay.
it was fantastic.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it was cool talking to myself for a half an hour. Yeah, it worked out.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, there's been plenty to talk about with the heat, so it wasn't like we were lacking content, of course. And
that's true.
Man, I'm so glad that we are done with that heat wave.
Oh man, we got through it. Yeah, that was pretty gnarly especially for a few days there.
Yeah, it was. So we're going to be going all over those numbers. Let's just bring up the presentation here. We always appreciate you joining the video version of the podcast. Of course, that's how you can see all the cool graphics that we prepare and we show on TV. This gives us a little bit more time to go into detail about them, though. We also have satellite imagery, and unfortunately, fire season is ramping up, so we'll be covering that. But yeah, heat wave numbers. We're going to go over this warm start to July. It actually has been the warmest start to July on record.
Wow.
We'll talk about some of the local fires that we're seeing out there. They're not super local to Northwest Oregon and Southwest Washington, so that's one nice piece of news. Obviously, we're going to talk about the forecast. We are weather anchors and meteorologists after all. This is a weather podcast. And then we'll wrap up this podcast with some great viewer photos. Always appreciate you guys sending those in so we can show them on TV, social media, and of course our podcast. So let me hop into this presentation once again. And Camila, last week, when I was recording the podcast, I was talking about how one of the first graphics that we bring up when we're getting ready to make the forecast in the Weather Center is the homepage of the National Weather Service website. So this is what it looked like last Friday, and there was some glaring signs that we were facing some extreme heat out west.
Yeah. Wow. That's significant. The entire just like western quarter of the U.S. Wow. Yeah.
So those were excessive heat warnings in violet, I guess you could call it. Orange were heat advisories, a step below excessive heat warnings. And there were excessive heat watches that were posted for the interior Northwest. So that was last Friday. This is what it looks like this morning. Not a lot of change, but some changes here in the Pacific Northwest, with most of Oregon and Washington out of the heat headlines. But we still have all of these excessive heat warnings and heat advisories posted for the Great Basin, the Southwest, and that tells us that that heat ridge is still lingering.
Is that pink red flag warning, or is that still a heat-related advisory?
Yeah, so Camila is referring to this red flag warning in central Washington.
Yeah, well, and like the rest of, a good chunk of California, Nevada.
Oh, yeah, there may be some down there, but no, all I'm seeing on the map is this section of Idaho that's under a red flag warning. And for those folks that are relatively new to the podcast and don't have a serious weather background, red flag warnings essentially mean that we're facing critical fire danger in some part of the country.
Yeah, the pinks, in my humble opinion, are too close together in this legend. They're hard to differentiate.
It's a good point, and I know that the National Weather Service has been making strides to improve the way they communicate. Actually, I think in 2025, they are going to be implementing some new titles for heat headlines and things like that to make it more obvious. Instead of like an excessive heat warning and heat advisory, I can't remember the exact titles. Mark and I were at that weather conference.
Oh, they talked about it there? That's cool.
Yeah. So they're going to be... They're just trying to simplify things so the general public can consume the information a little bit easier. But
great.
What I'm just showing you here is the fact that much of the western United States is still dealing with some pretty extreme heat. This is a look so far at what we've experienced for high temperatures in Portland. And yeah, we haven't had any cool days. Our coolest day was 77 degrees, and that's right near where we should be for the start of July. You can see at the bottom of the graphic, the average high the start of July is 78, and at the end of the July, it's 84. And, most days, Camilla, we've had highs in the 90s and triple digits.
Yeah. Yuck. So we're running, if you're watching and you can see this graphic on the right-hand side, running 9 degrees warmer than normal. So warmest start to July on record, huh, for Portland?
Yeah, and I'll explain why.
Ugh.
We had 5 straight days of daily record highs. So that means that we broke record highs for July 5th, July 6th, July 7th, July 8th, July 9th, 5 days straight.
Wow.
99, 99, 100, 102, 104, respectively. And it was even warmer down in the central Willamette Valley in Salem.
Yeah.
There were some daily record highs broken down there. So it was that, but it was also the 4 straight record warm nights that we experienced.
Right.
And Camilla, we just reported on Good Day Oregon that it's suspected that there were 12 deaths related to the heat. Of course, they're still doing their analysis to, make sure that that was the case. But I believe 6 of those were in Multnomah County. And, we hate to see that, of course. But the problem is, if the temperature only drops to 67 in Portland, that's around maybe a half hour after sunrise, right?
Yeah.
That means that most of the night temperatures are falling through the 80s, the 70s, and that is not cool enough to cool down your homes.
Right.
If you don't have AC.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because I think like growing up in the Midwest, right, we're all used to having air conditioning because you just straight up could not get through the summer without it. So I think people in other parts of the country don't realize that there's still a good chunk of the population up here that don't have AC to cool their homes. So that's why these heat waves are so dangerous. And yeah, that's really sad to learn those numbers.
And there are a lot of people that don't even have homes and don't make it to the cooling shelters necessarily. So yeah. We try to stress it as much as we can, but it's just an unfortunate thing that with these rising temperatures and the infrastructure that hasn't quite caught up to the way that the weather is developing, it's just the sad news of the matter. So,
and I do want to pick your brain, actually, if you want to go back to those low temperatures, because I know initially we were forecasting, we had some upper 60s. I think especially as the heat wave was starting, we even had it, I think, peaking around 70. Do you know why we were cooling down maybe a little bit more overnight than we were initially anticipating? I guess maybe compared to other heat waves. I was trying to figure out, because I think when the heat wave started, we were in the low 60s for a couple nights. And I was like, that's lower than what we initially thought.
I think it's a combination of things. We were trimming our temperature a little bit throughout the heat wave. So we weren't quite, I think we were like a degree or two cooler than expected. I think the models were kind of running a bit warmer. I know the National Weather Service had 105, I think maybe 106 at one point. But we never achieved exactly those high temperatures. We peaked at 104 at the end of the heat wave. So that's partially why. So that maybe trimmed
that
off
knocks it down a couple,
But also, sometimes during these offshore wind events, which this was not an offshore wind event, we can have wind during the overnight hours, and wind tends to keep the temperature more elevated as well. Obviously, offshore wind dries out the air. Drier air leads to bigger fluctuations in temperatures. But I think that just, maybe the wind calmed down enough and the temperatures were not quite as hot as we thought they would be during the afternoon. So we, bottomed out in the mid to upper 60s.
Yeah, that makes sense. We had just like that bit, almost like a whisper of that northwest wind in the afternoons, dies down overnight. So you're saying basically if we would have had that offshore flow, that east wind, we probably would have seen maybe some more upper 60s and some low 70s.
Oh, I think so, because it would have been much hotter during the afternoons.
Yeah,
and
that makes sense.
A windier night tends to be a warmer night. So,
cool.
All right, let's talk about how this has been the warmest start to July through the first 10 days of the month. So I know there's a lot of data on the map, a graphic right here. So I'm just going to use my cursor, and I've highlighted some of the important sections. So this is the first 10 days of the month in Portland. You could see I'm highlighting the high temperatures that we've achieved. These were the low temperatures. And at the bottom of the screen here, Camilla, you can see that we're averaging a high right now in Portland of 93.
Wow.
And, at the start of the month, the average high is 78. Right now, I believe it's 81 on July 11th. So we're running, 10 plus degrees. Well, technically 9 plus degrees above normal, but the high temperatures are running about 10 plus degrees above normal. The the average low is 61 degrees. That's a pretty warm night.
Mm.
And so our average temperature overall through the first 10 days of the month is 77.4 degrees. So this is a look at the warmest starts to July, the top 5 warmest starts to July through the first 10 days. And we are barely squeaking out at number 1, beating out 2015 by a tenth of a degree. So right on par with where 2015 was, and that was a very warm month in Portland. Mark, you know, I even brought up the fact that I brought up these rankings, and without even looking at the data, he was texting me. He was like, 2015 must be near the top.
Of course. He has all this logged away in his brain. It's incredible.
I know. It's incredible. Yeah, this has been pretty impressive stuff. And Camilla, I was like thinking about just the long range outlook, how warm and at times hot it looks, and I'm thinking to myself, boy, we have a real shot at experiencing our warmest July on record when all is said and done.
I was wondering that too. Yeah, there's just nothing. I'm sure we'll get into all the graphics and stuff, but there's just no big cool down that looks like it's on the way.
No, there isn't. I mean, we are going to be cooler than the extreme heat we just experienced.
Yeah.
But what I decided to do was I took the next 10 days, the national blend of models, which is a blend of computer models, spits out a temperature forecast for the next 7 to 10 days. I took the next 10 days, the highs and lows, and I input them, and I basically ran the projection. There are already, we can already look back at the data through the first 20 days, what were the warmest Julys on record, but I projected what we'll be at with the national blend of models.
Oh gosh.
And
I'm scared.
Well, this is what it is right here.
Oh no.
If the national blend of models verifies, if we're right on track with where we're going to be with that forecast, then we'll be in sulfur first place for warmest July on record through the first 20 days in Portland with an average temperature of 76.3 degrees. So, we're going to get into the forecast, of course, Camilla, but I don't see any extreme heat coming, but I don't see anything near or below normal to drop that average temperature down.
Yeah. So, I mean, even if these numbers don't come true, that's a pretty good margin between 1 and 2. So I think it is fair or safe to say we are on track to have maybe the hottest July we've seen so far in Portland.
Yeah, that's like a conservative estimate, I would say, and that's 2/3 of the way through the month. So,
right. Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Salem. Salem, first 10 days, we had some pretty extreme temperatures. I mean, if you look at July 5th through July 9th, I'm going to read off the highs: 103, 103, 103, 105, 106.
Wow.
And then there were 4 nights that were in the low to mid 60s. And that's, Salem is not it is a city center. There's plenty of asphalt and pavement, but it tends to run cooler during the nighttime as opposed to Portland. But there were still some pretty warm nights out there. So at the bottom of the screen, you can see that Salem through the first 10 days of the month is averaging a high of 96. It's averaging a low of 59. So the average temperature overall through the first 10 days of the month is 77.7 degrees. So Salem is also experiencing its warmest July start through the first 10 days.
Wow.
In sole first place by over a degree compared to 2015.
And are there, I guess, average high kind of trends similar to Portland's? I mean, I'm assuming it's just crazy to look at this and see the average temp averaging the lows and highs should be what the average highs only should be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think Salem, their average high runs a degree or two warmer than Portland. I would have to double check that data, but their low temperature typically runs cooler than Portland, I believe.
Yeah.
At least for the past 30 years rather, which that's what we base this off of, is the past 30 years, the normal temperature or the average over the past 30 years. So I did the same thing, Camilla. I took the projection of how the next 10 days will play out in Salem through the national blend of models and through, a projected first 20 days of the month. Salem is likely to be experiencing its warmest July on record 2/3 of the way through the month, with maybe an average temperature of about 76.4 degrees, with second place being 2015 at 74 degrees. So, we're, and some folks would say, it's summer. We're expected to, have hot days and warmer nights, but Unfortunately, when we bump that baseline up,
Mm-hmm.
that creates more evaporation in the vegetation, more stress on our environment, raises the fire danger just a little bit more. And yeah, I mean, it creates a bit more danger, even though we don't necessarily see it firsthand.
Right. Yeah. And if folks are wondering why, maybe for this specific heat wave, this setup, areas further south down the I-5 corridor, we're seeing hotter highs. It has to do with that very slight northwest breeze, right, Jeff? We tend to get a little bit more of that because of where we're positioned here in Portland.
That, and certainly we get a little bit more potentially onshore breeze or more influence from the coast in Portland because we're closer to the Columbia River.
Yep.
But also, if you think about where the center of the ridge of high pressure was,
True. They're also closer.
Salem, yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
Salem probably had stronger high pressure aloft compared to Portland through the duration of this heat wave.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, what we have seen as a result of this heat wave in this extended period of heat out west is a ramp up of fire season. We've seen more fires breaking out, not necessarily because of the heat, but the environment is drier and the ignition temperature, the ignition point is closer to where it should be in some of the vegetation. Basically, the environment is more favorable for fires to, spark up and to spread. So and that's in California, that's across the Southwest, and that extends up into Oregon and Washington as well. So I figure we touch on fire season and how things are playing out so far. So this was the visible satellite imagery this morning, and I'm starting off, Camilla, on a regional view, so you can see anywhere from Montana to Idaho, Washington, Oregon, Northern California, etc. And if you look closely, what's helpful, by the way, of showing the visible satellite imagery right around sunrise, you can see the light kind of pushing across the screen there. That's sunrise occurring across the western United States. The sun angle is a little bit lower, so it illuminates the smoke a little bit better. I think during peak heating hours, we don't see the smoke as visible on the graphic, but you can really make out the smoke this morning in parts of Northern California, Oregon, Washington, and Idaho.
Yeah, so that's what that kind of hazy, wispy stuff is. Yeah.
And of course, you can see the marine layer over the Pacific Ocean. I should actually use my cursor here. So this is the marine layer out here, and it was kind of grazing the Washington and Northern Oregon coast. So cloudier morning on this Thursday, July 11th, along the north coast versus areas to the south. Had a little patchy marine layer in parts of the metro area, but where I'm hovering my cursor over basically the southeast quadrant of Oregon, you can see a lot of smoke out there.
Yeah.
So, and that's, I say this quite frequently to friends and family. I think the farther west you live, the better chance you have at staying in good air quality, because fires don't occur over the Pacific Ocean. So the areas that get replenished, the air gets replenished earlier, those that are more close in proximity to the Pacific Ocean. Areas to the east have to deal with being downwind of fires typically. So if you have family in Idaho, Montana, unfortunately, any fires that are burning in Oregon, Washington, and Northern California, they're going to have to deal with some of that smoke out there.
Right.
Let's kind of zoom in a little bit here. This is more of a statewide view of Oregon, and you can see the Upper Pine Fire. That black dot on the screen there is the active fire scene, and then you can see, a combination of smoke from that fire north of Burns, but also you've got the fire burning in Northern California. That's the Shelley fire. You can really see that.
Yeah, wow.
Visible satellite imagery takes over. And look at all that smoke coming from that fire drifting up into Oregon. That fire right there in southwest Oregon, that is the Salt Creek fire. That's also producing quite a bit of smoke. And just some numbers for you, Camilla. The Shelley fire in Northern California, as of this morning when I created this presentation, has scorched over 9,200 acres.
Oh, wow.
The Salt Creek fire in Southern Oregon has scorched over 3,300 acres. And the Upper Pine fire north of Burns has scorched over 1,000 acres. So those are relatively large fires. Up to the north, we don't have too much smoke that we're dealing with, maybe a little bit of haziness out there. Let's zoom on in a little bit more, and I'm sure many of you at this point have heard about the Larch Creek fire that's burning in Wasco County, south of the Dalles, and that's southwest of Dufur. You can see all the smoke from that. Unfortunately, we got an update, Camilla, like an hour before I jumped into the podcast presentation, that it was at 0% containment. So firefighters have not been able to create a perimeter around that fire. And this fire has scorched now. Actually, I've got a graphic for it. Let's see. Over 10,600 acres. This is a big fire.
Wow. And that started just yesterday, or when did this one start? No,
I
this
believe
one's
2
been
days ago.
okay.
I think July 8th is what I recall. We got some really good photos and even some video, which unfortunately I couldn't bring the video into the presentation, but appreciate Sean Skiles for sending in this photo from, I believe this is just downwind of the fire. This is probably just east of the fire lines here. You can see the hills off in the distance. Look at how dry the vegetation is out there. I believe this is primarily a grass fire in a windy part of the state. I mean, every afternoon that sea breeze kicks up, funnels through the gorge, and then fans out over the Columbia River Basin. So not a great sight.
No, that's a tricky spot for sure.
And look at all the hot spots that were detected from space overnight and early this morning. I mean, this is a tough fire in a bad location. Yesterday, there were actually red flag warnings posted for the entire Columbia River Basin. The National Weather Service allowed those to expire this morning, but the wind is still going to be pretty gusty. I'm pulling data, the forecast from Dufur, which is just to the north of the fire, Camilla. But, if Dufur is experiencing 20 to 30 mile per hour gusts, I would imagine that the gusts around the fire are going to be in the ballpark of 15 to 25 miles per hour.
Yeah, that's tough. And then at night, of course, when things go calm, all that smoke just kind of pools close to the ground and just really impacts all those communities around there.
That's a great point. I was actually looking, we have the air quality map that we use on TV that we pulled data from, I believe, airnow.gov.
Yep.
So that's the government's website. But I was looking at some of Purple Air's data. Purple Air allows residents to buy at-home air quality monitoring stations, and you can see more neighborhood readings, if you will. And I was looking at some of the air quality readings out there, and they were 200 plus AQI, which puts us in a very unhealthy category.
Yeah. And that's a good point. That's good to check those multiple different places, because I feel like we're pretty limited as to where those stations or readings are. There's so few of them that I feel like it probably doesn't tell the full air quality story in that area.
No doubt. So you're right. The air was kind of pooling the smoke down near the surface. That's very typical during the nighttime hours. This afternoon, I think that part of the state is probably going to be climbing to about 90, 95 or so. That creates instability. That air rises and allows that fire to grow vertically. And then when the wind comes in out of the northwest, it just fans the flames off to the east. So I think that fire is going to continue to grow. And we don't have any rain in sight, unfortunately. So we should talk about the forecast. I know have you been training still?
What do you mean?
Outdoor training during the heat.
Oh, I mean, no, especially now that I'm entering my third trimester, which is crazy. So I was really hiding in the air conditioning during this heat wave and just taking doing my fitness classes, but in air conditioning. So no, I'm not messing with that.
I don't blame
with that
you.
kind of heat. Yeah.
How have the pups been doing handling the heat?
Yeah, they're good. I mean, same thing. I feel so bad because they're going on much fewer walks, and I get up later in the morning, so I can't, by the time I'm waking up, it's already too hot. So we have to wait till 9, 10 p.m. to take them on a walk.
I know. It's my Pepper, who's pushing 14 years old. She is insistent during the hottest time of the day. I just want to go on the deck, bugging us over and over again. And it's and you just watch her, burning her paws. I'm like, come on in,
I know. Yeah.
But it's hard. These dogs want to be in the sun, but we should not be walking our dogs between midday, essentially.
Yeah.
I would even say 11 a.m. till 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when that sun is beaming on the pavement. Even if it's 85, Camilla, that pavement is hot. It's well over 100 degrees. So I've heard the best way to test it is use the inside of your wrist, push it on you could even slip your shoes out, or your feet out of your shoes and walk onto the pavement. If it's too hot for you, it's too hot for the pups.
Right. Definitely.
So let's talk about the upper level pattern. Let's get right into this forecast here.
Mm.
High pressure is anchored over the Great Basin, it looks like. The center of that ridge of high pressure aloft is going to be right over, it looks like, Nevada and western Utah and northern Arizona. This is Thursday late afternoon, upper level chart showing geopotential heights higher than normal heights, which means strong high pressure, big dome of high pressure still anchored over the southwestern United States. Take this into Friday, the ridge starts to inch eastward, kind of working its way over the Four Corners by Saturday into Sunday. And I want to stop right there, Camilla. Have you ever heard of the term the Four Corners High?
Yes.
Anything
She
ring a bell?
says with hesitation.
I won't test you.
Thanks.
The Four Corners High is something that meteorologists, use to describe a pattern that typically means the monsoon season is going to be ramping up during warm season. I didn't actually describe that very well. So basically what happens is Four Corners High, you have high pressure aloft focusing over the Four Corners region. So Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah. Air typically rotates clockwise around high pressure systems, and that tends to pull monsoonal moisture in from Mexico. So with an increase in moisture in the Southwest, that tends to lead to more thunderstorms during the afternoons this time of year. So late this weekend or sometime during this weekend into early next week, it's very possible that the Southwest, like Arizona, New Mexico, so on and so forth, will probably see an increase in thunderstorm activity. Notice that little trough right offshore of California there, that weak trough. Nothing too significant. It's possible, though, that this Four Corners High might push a disturbance up to the north over the West Coast. You can see that disturbance there Sunday, right offshore of Northern California, and maybe offshore of Southern Oregon and Northern California Monday. It looks really weak, Camilla.
Yeah.
But it's summertime. Vegetation is really dry. The last thing we need is for dry lightning to form in parts of the Pacific Northwest or Northern California.
True.
So just kind of something to think about in the forecast. Generally speaking, these geopotential heights are going to be staying above normal for the foreseeable future. This is Monday afternoon, Tuesday afternoon, Wednesday afternoon, Thursday afternoon. High pressure is just going to be kind of parked over the western United States. Luckily, I don't see us directly underneath it anytime soon. That's why we don't see any extreme heat coming for the foreseeable future, but it's going to keep our temperatures above where they should be.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, if the positioning stays as models indicate, we at least have, because of that rotation, a little bit of that onshore flow helping us out here in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, the hope is that we get kind of a trough carving this ridge out a little bit, pushing it, nudging it a little bit farther to the east, but it doesn't really look like that's going to happen a whole lot. But this forecast is certainly better than what we just dealt with, right?
Yeah, definitely. 80s and low 90s, we'll take it.
We'll take it, although we should be in the low 80s.
I
right?
know. Yeah, it's not the best, but it could be worse, folks. It could be way worse.
And that onshore breeze should bring, a patchy marine layer each morning. So around sunrise and just after, you should see varying degrees of cloud cover, maybe a bit more Monday morning. And that's why I think Monday should be the coolest day of the next week with highs in the mid 80s. Nights are going to remain cool. Even though we're going to be in the upper 80s and low 90s, the evenings, the mornings are going to be nice. So problem with the 100 plus degree heat is we're already in the 90s by midday.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you get
brutal.
a pretty limited amount of time where it's actually tolerable outside.
Totally. Looking at the long range forecast, we like to look at what the temperature outlook looks like at 5,000 feet in the sky and to the higher elevations. And the green, I like to focus on the green in the long term, the mean, the ensemble mean, Camilla, because that I think is more reliable than looking at the one operational model. So this is the Euro outlook for temperatures. And I don't see anything, in the ensemble mean climbing above 20 degrees Celsius at 5,000 feet, which means we're probably going to be staying clear of 100 degree heat for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, that's good. We like to see that.
There's something going on, though. It looks like maybe around July, let's say July 23rd to July 26th, maybe a blip in the model run.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps something hotter coming toward the last week of July. Let's hope not. But that's the Euro outlook. The GFS outlook, when you look at the ensemble mean, looks pretty darn steady. My goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Right around 15 degrees Celsius at 5,000 feet.
Mm-hmm.
That's still a little bit warm for this time of year, but more 80s to low 90s is what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and not seeing huge swings is always kind of nice.
It is, totally.
Yeah.
So this is just the raw temperature outlook for the European ensemble outlook. And, you could see a lot of 80s, low 90s. So pretty much where we were thinking. Overnight lows in the 50s and low 60s. And the GFS ensemble outlook is looking quite similar to that.
Yeah.
So.
See, that's the kind of stuff that I would like to send my Midwest friends when I want to tell them what summers are like here. I'm like, look at that. High temperatures and low temperatures, pretty much the same every day. Sunshine. Summer is here in the Pacific Northwest.
There will not be a lot of complaints, I'm sure.
Yeah. Even though we're a little warmer than average, but still.
The true weather nerds are going to say, yeah, that's warm.
Yeah.
We should be a little cooler. But, anybody that's stuck in the Southwest under that extreme heat would take this any day of the week.
Yeah.
So, got to look at the bright side, right? At some
exactly.
point.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into the best part of the
My
podcast,
favorite.
viewer photos. So let's see what came in this week. And I'll tell you this, Gary Peterson, he's a fan of Fox 12 Oregon. He's a great photographer locally. We tend to bring in his photos often.
Does he live at Trillium Lake?
Well, I know that he works around the Mount Hood area. I don't know where he actually lives, but he is, I believe, Ski Bowl's photographer during the winter time, maybe even during the summertime at Adventure Park. But look at all those paddleboarders out there. This was, well, not just paddleboarders. I'm sure there are other folks doing other things on the lake. This was Trillium Lake when the heat was peaking. This is when we hit 104 in Portland and 106 in Salem, I believe. Everybody kind of had the same thought. Let's get up to the mountains.
So good. Because it would have been, 80s maybe up here?
I believe so. I should have checked that.
I feel like it was probably low to mid 80s. I guess. What's the elevation of Trillium Lake? I should know this.
Trillium Lake is at about 4,000 feet, I believe.
Okay. Yeah. Probably low 80s. I mean, beautiful for being on the water. Yeah.
Such a cool shot. I love the contrast, the lake, the green.
So
and
good.
Of course, Mount Hood.
Yeah.
All right. I got one more from Gary the next day, which was yesterday, July 10th. He went over to Lost Lake. What a cool shot.
So good.
So thanks to Gary for sending in his really cool shots. Let's take another. Well, this is from a different perspective. This is from Florence. This was sent in by Ryan Reynolds, and I believe he was out there on July 10th, and it looked like he was on a little mini road trip up the coast. So cool shot from some tide pools, a little bit of a marine layer, and then he went up to the Hesida Head Lighthouse in Yachats.
Gorgeous.
That's a neat shot. I've never been to that part of the coast, and I feel like I need to go.
I know, same. Yeah, it's on my list. So pretty.
Yeah, so thanks to Ryan, and of course, thanks to everybody else that not only sends in their photos, but also tunes into our podcast.
Yeah.
That about does it for today.
Nice. I was kind of hoping, Jeff, that you'd throw in, did you see the dog on a pool floaty photo it was sometime during the heat wave. I think her name was Sophie. She's literally just chilling in a pool, has a little beverage next to her. It's really good.
I did not see Sophie, but now I'm intrigued.
Yeah. Well, just scroll back. Next time you're in the office, just take a peek at that one, because that one made me smile.
I hope you use that for our famous dog walking forecast.
Absolutely, I did. In fact, I used it for multiple shows because I loved it so much, like multiple days.
Sophie deserved the limelight.
Yeah.
Well, great seeing you, Camila, as always.
Likewise.
We typically only see each other virtually now because we're on opposite shifts. But, great to hear you're doing well. And thanks to everybody for tuning into the Fox 12 Weather Podcast. I'm not sure if Mark's going to be back next week. Mark has been
When is that man not on vacation?
He deserves his time off, but he loves his summertime weather.
Yeah, it's true.
So we'll find out who's going to be on next week. It's always a crapshoot around here, but stay cool out there and have a great rest of your day.
You're waiting and hesitating and tell us